Get 25% off a subscription to Babbel by clicking the link below. Babbel is an awesome language learning app. They're one of our sponsors. I use Babbel to improve my Italian, and I'm loving the results. I'd recommend Babbel to anyone. Go check it out. Last week, I told you that things have gone off the beaten path when we are judging how a president is doing, not by their approval rating, but by the level of support for their impeachment, which is the way that things have shifted with Donald Trump. But there's an even more stunning metric, which is how many people want Donald Trump imprisoned, never mind impeached. And now a majority of Democratic voters in those early primary states, the states that will be voting in the first few months of 2020, they don't just believe that Donald Trump should be impeached, but a majority of early Democratic primary state voters believe that Donald Trump should be imprisoned. 53% in Iowa, 50% in New Hampshire, 54% of Democrats in South Carolina are saying not just that Donald Trump should be impeached and removed from office, but that he should be imprisoned. Now, these are stunning numbers, but does this matter? Because this is, in the end, just Democratic primary voters. They're some of the most politically involved people, arguably some of the more partisan people that you could poll. Does it really matter? And the answer is that in a vacuum, it really doesn't. All of these indicators are merely sort of proxies to whether Donald Trump might be voted out in November. A record 69%, for example, say that they dislike Donald Trump personally. Okay. Does it matter? It matters if it gets people to go and vote in November for somebody other than Donald Trump. Support for impeaching and removing Donald Trump is higher than ever. Even among Republicans, as I told you last week, in the 2 weeks or so since the beginning of the Ukraine fiasco, support among Republicans for the impeachment inquiry has roughly tripled from about 11% to about 30%. Does that matter? Well, it matters if it affects how people vote in November of 2020. It matters if it keeps enough Republicans from voting at all that it will allow the Democratic base to get somebody else elected other than Donald Trump in November of 2020. In a sense, the headline, majority of early voters want Trump imprisoned, could be rewritten much less hyperbolically as majority of early voters can recognize when crimes have been committed, period. But unless it actually creates a certain action in November of 2020, it's really moot. The entire fiasco is really illuminating one of the most important differences between Democrats and Republicans, which is that Democrats want Trump held responsible, impeached, investigated, maybe imprisoned, whatever you believe is appropriate, for the crimes that he's clearly committed, for the way that he has clearly sold out our sovereignty to foreign powers. Republicans want Hillary Clinton imprisoned because they don't like her, and Trump said lock her up, and they've been successfully brainwashed into thinking something about her emails means she should go to prison. There's an above the law component that's visible here with Trump and his cronies that if we don't root it out, it could not only take hold, but it could grow, and it's terribly toxic for the United States of America. Now, I'm not someone who just defends Democrats. I've told you on tons of issues, there's no practical difference between Democrats and Republicans. For the most part, on reinforcing the status quo of campaign finance, Democrats and Republicans are basically the same, with some exceptions. Bernie's plan to get money out of politics is a very good one. Andrew Yang has such a plan. There are Democrats who have plans, but there's not a lot of air in terms of like your mainstream elected officials between the two parties on that issue. For the most part, Democrats and Republicans are almost equally complicit in reinforcing the status quo of the military-industrial complex and the wide-reaching tentacles of the Pentagon and the American military. There are some exceptions, but there are areas of difference, and I've pointed out this one before. When the left finds out that someone in their ranks is a problem, we want to get that person out because they're hurting the movement. They're a distraction. We don't want to cover it up. We want to expose it and get that person out, sometimes to a fault. Look at what happened with Al Franken. Now, in retrospect, a lot of those Democrats who said Al Franken should resign probably went too far. On the right, they want to cover it up. They want to cover for that person, period. And of course, the hypocrisy of thinking that their people above the law are above the law is a stark contrast with the Democratic Party. Some may actually be so disconnected from reality that they really believe Donald Trump hasn't done anything wrong and Democrats are just being mean. But I believe at this point that most of them are plainly happy to just cover for Trump with any old excuse they can come up with, as illogical as that may be. And unless we get out and vote in November of 2020, they well may get away with it. And that's the scariest part of all of this. Make sure you are following The David Pakman Show on Instagram at David Pakman Show. While you're there, follow me at david.pakman.